Imagine waking up one day to find your sister and her husband have practically taken over your parents' entire house. Every room, every routine, every decision suddenly theirs. What started as a temporary stay turned into them acting like permanent owners, and everyone in the house was expected to adjust to their new rules. But the real shock came when they began treating me like their built-in babysitter. No asking, no checking my schedule, just dropping their kids on me and walking away like it was my duty. At first, I thought it was a misunderstanding. Maybe they were stressed, maybe they assumed I'd help once in a while. But when I finally said no, their attitude flipped instantly. The entitlement, the anger, the accusations, it all came out at once. And that's when I realized this wasn't about babysitting at all. It was about control, and I wasn't playing along. When my sister and her husband decided to move into our parents' house, I honestly thought it would be temporary, a few weeks at most while they sorted out their situation. But almost immediately, everything changed. They didn't just move in, they took over. They rearranged rooms, set new routines, and acted like the house belonged entirely to them. My parents, being the peace-loving people they are, stayed quiet and hoped things would settle down. But they didn't. Instead, the entitlement grew, and before long, I somehow became part of their plan, specifically their free on-call babysitter. They started assuming I'd watch their kids whenever they felt like going out or taking a break, and they didn't even bother asking. At first, I tried to help, but the more they pushed, the more obvious it became. They weren't grateful, they were demanding. And eventually, I reached my breaking point. When my sister and her husband first arrived at our parents' house with their luggage, kids, and stressed expressions, I honestly felt sympathy. They had been dealing with financial issues, rent problems, and job instability. My parents didn't hesitate for a second. They opened the doors, reassured them, and set up a room so they could settle in comfortably. For the first couple of days, everything seemed peaceful. But the shift came quietly, almost unnoticed at first. My sister began treating the house like a blank slate for her own preferences. She rearranged the living room furniture without asking. She filled the kitchen cabinets with her own groceries and pushed my parents' things aside. Soon, her husband started waking up early and taking over the main TV to play loud shows, claiming it was his morning routine. My parents are gentle, soft-spoken people who avoid conflict, so they laughed it off, even if I could tell it bothered them. Within a week, they were involving themselves in household decisions as if they owned the place. My sister insisted on setting new schedules for mealtimes for the kids' sake. She even suggested moving my father's workshop tools out of the storage room because she wanted more space for their things. My father hesitated, but didn't argue. My mother simply nodded and kept quiet. But what surprised me most was how naturally they slipped into this dynamic, as if the house had always been theirs. They invited guests over without informing anyone. They cooked large meals and left the cleanup for others. They spoke loudly, made demands, and acted irritated if someone questioned them. What used to be a calm home became chaotic, noisy, and filled with tension. Yet through all of this, I tried to stay patient. I kept telling myself their situation was temporary, and the stress of life had made them act differently. Still, deep down, a part of me knew this wasn't just stress, this was entitlement. And it was only a matter of time before their expectations expanded even further, eventually turning directly toward me. The first babysitting request came disguised as a friendly favor. My sister popped into my room with a rushed tone, claiming she needed to run out for a quick errand, and asked if I could keep an eye on the kids for just 15 minutes. I didn't mind. They're my nieces and nephews, and I genuinely enjoy spending time with them. That 15 minutes turned into 2 hours. No apology, no explanation. She simply returned, checked her phone, and said, "They weren't any trouble, right?" before walking off. The next time, she didn't even bother asking. She left the kids in the living room and walked out with her husband, shouting over her shoulder, "We'll be back soon." I was left standing there. Confused, I tried to talk to her afterward, gently explaining that I had plans that day, and she shrugged it off, saying, "Come on, you live here rent-free." Helping family is normal. That line struck me. Helping family is normal, yes, but being used is not. Days passed, and her demands grew bolder. She started assuming I was available any time she felt overwhelmed or simply didn't feel like parenting. She'd leave the kids sleeping in. The day I finally set a clear boundary wasn't dramatic at first. It felt like a normal morning. I had plans to go out with a friend, and I was getting ready when my sister barged into my room without knocking. She dropped a diaper bag on my bed and said, "We're going out, watch the kids." Just like that. No question, no consideration, no acknowledgement that I might have my own schedule. I took a breath and calmly replied, "I can't today. I already have plans." She froze for a second, as if I had spoken a language she didn't understand. Then her face twisted into irritation. "Are you serious? What kind of person refuses to help family? You're literally doing nothing important." Her husband appeared behind her, crossing his arms and glaring at me like I owed them something. I tried to remain firm but calm. "I've watched them multiple times already, and I don't mind helping occasionally, but you can't just assume I'm always available." That sentence flipped a switch in her. She stepped closer and raised her voice. "You're living here for free. The least you can do is help out with my kids. We're already stressed and you're being selfish." Her husband chimed in, saying I was acting entitled. Ironically, he lectured me about family responsibility while failing to notice that dropping kids on someone without permission is not responsibility, it's exploitation. When I didn't back down, my sister stormed to my parents, dragging them into the conflict. My parents tried to mediate, but they were clearly uncomfortable. My mother gently suggested, "Maybe you can help this one time." But I stood my ground. I told them I wasn't refusing because I didn't care. I was refusing because the expectation had become unreasonable. My sister, however, wasn't interested in understanding. She escalated further, accusing me of being jealous, lazy, inconsiderate, and uncaring toward her children. The anger in her voice wasn't about babysitting, it was about control slipping out of her hands. And in that moment, I realized we had reached a point of no return. She wasn't going to accept any boundaries unless they were forced. After the confrontation, the house became a battlefield of silent tension and whispered complaints. My sister walked around with dramatic sighs, loud enough for everyone to hear, making comments under her breath about certain people who don't care about family. Her husband avoided me completely, except for the occasional glare or shake of his head. Their kids, confused and innocent, kept asking why they couldn't play in my room like before my parents were caught in the middle, trying desperately to keep peace. My mother urged me to ignore the behavior and let things settle. My father suggested everyone take some space, but my sister kept escalating. She complained to relatives, twisting the story until it seemed like I had abandoned her in her time of need. Soon, cousins and aunts were texting me, asking why I couldn't help a struggling mother. They didn't know the full story, but she didn't want them to. One evening, she confronted me again, claiming I had turned the family against her. She said I was creating division in the house. I reminded her of everything that had led to this, the expectations, the demands, the lack of respect. Instead of listening, she accused me of undermining her as a parent. Finally, I made my decision. I told her calmly that I would no longer be involved in her childcare unless she asked respectfully and accepted that I could say no. She didn't like that. She stormed off, slammed doors, and told her husband they needed to move out because no one here supports us. For the first time, my parents stepped in. Not against me, but to tell her enough was enough. Within a week, she and her husband packed up to stay with a friend. The house slowly returned to peace. My parents apologized for not speaking up earlier. I reassured them that I wasn't angry. I just refused to be taken advantage of. And the truth is, I still love my sister and her kids, but love doesn't mean surrendering your boundaries. Sometimes standing up for yourself isn't about defiance, it's about self-respect. And in the end, that's what finally brought peace back to our home.